Howdy, folks. Spencer here, and today I want to talk to you about the recent changes, or the nerf, that just happened to the Maelstrom Quantum Torpedo Launcher with the recent patch on PC that happened on July 13th, 2023. As always, chapters are listed down below for those of you that want to skip ahead. And the first thing I want to take a look at is just a quick recap of what the Maelstrom Torpedo is. I do have a video that I released a couple months ago going over the torpedo in a bit more detail regarding the mechanics and all that. So I'll have a link down in the description below if you want to check that out and learn about the Torp in a bit more detail. So the Maelstrom is a long cooldown torpedo. It is a charge-based torp. It has the ability to store 3 charges on it, and each charge takes 30 seconds to charge up. That 30 seconds cannot be impacted at all by any of the cooldown reduction items in the game for torpedoes. So CF doesn't affect it, Torp cooldown reduction DOFs don't affect it, ceaseless momentum, it's staying at that 30 seconds. And with it having 3 charges, that means that if you want to build the Maelstrom up to its maximum effectiveness, you need to not fire it for 90 seconds to get it up to its 3 stacks, or at least that's how it did work. So the Maelstrom's entire point is that you're not auto-firing it, you're not spam barring it, you're using it strategically. You're not going to fire it off that often. You're going to think about when you're using it so that you get the most burst damage potential out of it. The Maelstrom, when it comes to like its actual DPS, if you just fire it like auto fire or whatever, it's not going to be that great compared to some of the other torps out there, which I showed in the test that I did the other day, especially with its inability to be impacted by cooldown reduction items. It can fall quite far behind some of the other torpedoes that we have out there from just an overtime DPS point of view. But that's not how the Maelstrom is used. The way that the Maelstrom was used is that you would wait for the charges to build up and you would time it to use it alongside a ton of the damage buffs that you had. And when you did that, you could get an amazing amount of damage out of it, to the point where if you look at some of the current torpedo DPS records up on the table, you know, some of these runs have over a third of their damage from the Maelstrom quantum torpedoes on it. So if it's used correctly with a ton of damage buffs, you can get a lot out of it. But if you're just trying to auto fire it, you know, it was never doing that impressive damage wise compared to some of the other things you could have been doing. Now, I do have some clips to show from the 10 forward streams where they talked about this stuff. Thanks to Joe and Stowe for getting these clips compiled.
And the dream is that this will enable a play pattern more like what Star Trek Online originally envisioned, more like what we see on the show, where you fight for a little while and you decide, like the decision to fire the Torp is a deliberate decision.
So again, you know, the torpedo's entire design intention was to be a weapon that you think about firing. You know, it's building up these charges and you're thinking about where you're using it. That's the point of it.
Lives, but the point is more to being able to take 90 seconds worth of quantum torpedoes and push them through one high yield tree.
You know, again, that's the point, is you're not firing the weapon for a very long time, so that when you do fire it, you're getting all that damage in one go, rather than these other torps which are doing, you know, that much damage over time. So the point is to get all that damage out in one salvo, rather than, you know, over the course of 90 seconds. That's the point of this weapon. The next thing I want to talk about are the issues that the Maelstrom had. And there's really a couple ones that we can boil things down to. The fact is, the Maelstrom in lower difficulty content is insanely powerful. There was a lot of discussion going around about the crystalline entity being one-shot. And the specific clip that I think is being referenced to is from a stream that I did right after the Maelstrom launched, in which we were able to go in and take out the crystalline entity in the first phase. So I went through, and in the process of making this video, I did go through and find the combat log from that just to double check things. And the damage from my team to the crystalline entity was 13.6 million. But if I look at my specific damage and I look at my Maelstrom, I did 9.5 million of that 13.5 million damage to the entity, but my Maelstrom only accounted for 3.27 million of that. And in fact, my recursive was very close behind it at just under 3 million there. So the Maelstrom was not responsible for one-shotting that. Rather, what happened in that crystalline catastrophe advanced is that something bugged out with the Q. Something bugged out that caused the immunity phase to not go off, and it just dying so fast, led to a very interesting reaction from myself and everyone else there, because we're like, what just happened? Is the Maelstrom that OP? But the fact is, it was the Q bugging out, and the Maelstrom did a fair bit of damage for sure, but the Maelstrom in that specific instance only did 25% of the entity's HP basically. So it's still a lot, yes, but it's the specific example is not completely accurate. And if anyone from Cryptic is listening, um, might be time to tune the crystalline catastrophe Q a little bit, make it a 5-player TFO, give us an elite version, and fix these invulnerability phase issues, because I imagine others have had similar issues pop up and had a similar reaction. Okay, so the next issue with the Maelstrom is something that I've commented on, and that is the idea that some people may consider it a pay-to-win item. The fact is that the Maelstrom is part of a $120 bundle, and it's extremely powerful. Like they're definitely, if you don't have the Maelstrom, you do not have the same spike damage potential with whatever you're using. The Maelstrom was very good at that role, and there's no equivalent to it outside of the bundle. So that is another issue that may have influenced their decision to finally go in and act on it. And if that is the case, they could easily just add like an alternative version of it, which they've already talked about. Add an alternative version of it to the fleet or the Dill store. There's ways to put alternative versions of this in the game. People would go nuts for like a photon version, a K13, or something like that. So there's many different ways they could address that issue if that was indeed the cause for them going through and finally acting, is the idea that it could be pay to win item. Now, back to it one-shotting things. The issue with this idea, and in fact this is sort of what they talked about in the patch notes, is the fact that this thing has been one-shotting bosses too easily. The issue's there. Again, the thing starts off at 3 charges as soon as you load into a map. That probably needs to go. The next issue with that is the fact that people are using it in non-elite content. And the issue when people use high-performing things in normal or advanced content is that difficulty level is fairly trivial once you understand how to build your ship. And an example I'll show here is a recent run that I did with my my Constitution 3. So this is a Fire at Will Phaser Beam Array build with the wide-angle Quantum Torp on from the Sovereign, and this is Fire at Will Phaser Beam Arrays, and this is just the state of power creep and stow. The last time we had a difficulty update was like 2018 with Victory is Life. So content nowadays, if you have a good build in general, is just trivial. This is a Fire at Will build with a bunch of phaser beam arrays on it. Like this is practically like an RP build, and it's just obliterating the queue. So on the topic of Maelstrom just going in and one-shotting bosses too easily, I think that's just a universal issue in this lower difficulty content. They need to get people that have good builds to shift over to elite content, but it's hard. It's hard for people to find competent players to team up with for elite content. Random elites would be absolutely terrible. As is even just pugging some of the elite queues, that you can get a very rough team experience there. Um, I don't know. Maybe I know they've ramped up the rewards with the advanced stuff in elite, but the issue is people are going into this lower difficulty content with these really powerful items that are really designed for elite content, and it's just obliterating this normal and advanced stuff. And you get people complaining all over the place on the forums about people one-shotting things, and it's because these builds belong in elite, but the incentive to play elite just isn't there for a lot of people. And I think that's one of the issues that, or one of the causes for Maelstrom to get hit like it did, is the fact that with very little investment into it on your build, you can just toss it on, hit Torp spread, wipe out part of the map on normal or advanced. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons here that they've done this. So now I wanted to take a look at the things that they actually did to it here, which I have up on screen now. The nerf that they did is that they've cut the recharge time of the Maelstrom in half. So it was 30 seconds per charge before, now it's 15 seconds. So it's 45 seconds to get all 3 charges versus 90 before. And to compensate, they have cut the damage of it in half. And they did note that the overall DPS is unchanged. But again, you know, I think as I was saying before, you weren't using the Maelstrom necessarily for doing DPS. You're using the Maelstrom for its damage, its burst damage. And the damage on it is literally cut in half with this nerf. So its usefulness as a spike ability is drastically decreased with this update. So now I want to talk about some of the solutions that Cryptic could follow to address the issues I discussed before. And again, the issues are, it could be seen as a pay-to-win item, given that the only one in the game right now is from a $120 bundle. The fact that you have charges at launch, the duration it takes to build a charge, and the damage you get from the charge, and then of course the performance of it in normal or advanced content. So the first issue, pay to win, that's easy to address. Cryptic talked about making alternative versions of the Maelstrom when they initially were discussing it on the stream when it first came out. That's very easy to address. They, just make a new version of it, toss it in a Dill store, Fleet store, I don't care where. Just, make like a Photon version and people will be happy with that. Or make a different version of it for Quantum that has a different visual or something, or maybe just the default Quantum visual. There's many different ways to go about that. That's easy to address. That issue, very easy for them to solve, I imagine. The second one is having charges at launch. So when people are doing low difficulty content, having like the CCA you see in the background there, I've got 3 charges. I just loaded in basically, and I've got 3 charges of the Maelstrom. If the Maelstrom were to not start building charges up until the match started, instead of having them all there for you instantly, that would probably help with some of the one-shotting issues that we're seeing in that lower difficulty content, because that's going to make people that are running the content really fast not want to run something that's just not going to be available for the bulk of the run. So that would be a very, very easy route to go, is just removing the charges at launch. And that'd probably help out a lot in the normal or advanced content there. Especially, you think someone starts up like an infected advanced, and yeah, they might have 1 charge at the start, but that's better than them having 3 charges right at the start, So that'd be a good fix. The charge duration and burst damage nerf, I'm still not a fan of that. What they ended up going with. I think they should have went the other way. I think that if anything, they should have made the charges longer and just fully committed to this being a strategic weapon. Make the charges at 30 seconds I thought were fine. They could do 40 seconds, buff the damage up if they wanted there or not. But really fully commit to the idea that this is a strategic weapon. If you're worried about people buying this, and wanting a Torp with these visuals, you could also do the same thing as issue 1 there and just make an alternative version of this torpedo that works like a normal one but has these visuals that addresses the people that just want, these visuals but don't care about the performance. So I think, they should fully commit to this line of torps being, burst damage focused, and just make sure that if they have a unique visual, that there's an alternative version of them out there for people that don't care about that burst damage idea. And then of course the last one is performance in normal or advanced content. The way that they can address this is similar to how they address the PvP side of things. If you look at a Maelstrom in game and you look at the info for it, you'll notice that against other players it does 50% of the damage. So one of the ways that they might want to look at things like Maelstrom moving forward is have it so that the damage scales down based on the difficulty. Imagine if you're in normal content, the Maelstrom does 25% of the damage of what it would do in Elite. If you're in advanced content, it does 50%. I think that would be one of the routes that they could go to prevent Maelstrom from being, or other things, just being extremely overpowered in that lower difficulty content while retaining the usefulness in Elite for people that want to play that content. So that's what I would say to do there. Like any combo, those would be fine. I definitely think the charge duration and the burst damage needs to go back to what it was before. I feel like what they've done has just taken away the entire point of the torpedo, personally. So to summarize things here, and just summarize my thoughts on this all, the nerf to the Maelstrom halved the time it takes to build up a charge, but it also halved the damage that you get from each of the charges. And the issue is yes, the overall DPS is unchanged of this if you're just shooting it at a static target and ignoring the burst damage side of it. But the issue is that the Maelstrom was meant to be a burst damage weapon, and it was meant to be something that you would use strategically in a run to get a large burst damage against, a target that may be a bit harder to take down. And with the approach that they've taken here, they have completely stripped that away from this weapon. It is no longer something that many people are going to use because they're going to have more impact from the other torpedoes that exist in the game. I think that this was a neat concept, and I liked how it performed in Elite content, but it did clearly have a bit of an overperformance issue in normal or advanced content. The issue is it's getting singled out when there's so many different things in the game that are able to just go in and, one-shot most of the content. I showed earlier in this stream a fire at will build, which is practically like an RP phaser beam array wide-angle quantum build on the Connie 3. Like, that's just one-shotting, an advanced Q basically for the most part. And there's been so much power creep over the years. I just hate seeing a single thing singled out like this. So I think also another negative to this nerf is the fact that we've had this push to get people into Elite content recently. We've had this push with the advanced consoles to get people to run the Elite queues. The Maelstrom was a very good tool that was good for people to run on, hybrid builds or whatever. It was a torpedo that you could use as a burst weapon that you didn't have to have all the torp traits on to get, a ton of performance out of. The fact is, like, if I'm on a hybrid do torp build, I can get comparable performance from running like the EBM with high yield and subspatial warheads and like rapid emitting armaments. But with the Maelstrom, I didn't need those traits. I could just run the torp with torp spread, and the downside is, like, I was able to get a comparable amount of damage, but I had to fire it correctly. I had to time it. I had to time it for when I had a ton of buffs up, and it was really good for giving builds a little bit more of a burst punch in that Elite content, and it's really a shame to see what they've done to it. So I'd say, like, right now, unless they change the Maelstrom back to what it was before, you pretty much just want to swap back to whatever torps you were using before. I don't think I would bother with the Maelstrom in most situations nowadays. If you're using high yield, you're better off with the Delphic from the Lobby store if you're just going in a single target environment, or if you're going into an AoE heavy environment with high yield, then the enhanced biomolecular from the Undine 8472 rep would be better. And if you're doing Torp spread, like Maelstrom can still do okay there. Like it's above some of these other ones, but I think you'd be much better off using the Dark Matter Quantum, which in the test I did the other day ended up doing about twice the damage in the same time frame than the Maelstrom. The Maelstrom still had those larger max 1 hits, to be clear, but the Dark Matter, from a DPS point of view, is going to win out. But the Maelstrom just doesn't have enough of a punch now to make up for its lower DPS. Like the entire thing with Maelstrom again was using it for the burst damage. It was never like in long duration stuff. It was going to underperform a lot of these other torpedoes. You were using it to get the large bursts of damage when you needed it, rather than the sustained DPS the other torpedoes give you. So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think down below. I'm not happy about it. I think there's other ways that they could have went about it, and hopefully we see some more tuning happen to it, because it's gonna hurt, customer satisfaction and customer trust in them moving forward. Again, we're almost a year out from the Agony and the Rise of Weather Control vessel nerfs, and that left a lot of people sour, and there were hopes that things would change here. I think things still overall have been better, but this is definitely a hit on Cryptic for customer trust in them. So I'd like to see them fix this. I know some people are saying they should offer refunds for the bundle, or give us some sort of compensation. And personally, I just want to see them fix the torpedo. The torpedo definitely was a big influence on why some of us bought the bundle, for sure, and I want to see them fix it. I don't want some like Zen compensation or a refund. I just want the weapon that I bought to work to the same intention that it did before as a burst weapon, and it just ain't there now. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you all for tuning into this little rant. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them down below, and I'll get back to you when I can. Take care and see you all around.